8-year-old Lucy pressed her face against the cold metal window of the alien transport ship, watching strange purple clouds drift past. Her teddy bear, Mr. Buttons, sat in her lap with one eye missing and stuffing poking out from his worn fabric. 3 weeks had passed since her father died from the plague that swept through their mining colony, and the Zephyrian crew had promised to take her to safety at the human settlement on Kepler Station. But Lucy didn't understand the harsh clicking sounds the aliens made when they thought she wasn't listening. She didn't know that their food supplies were running out faster than expected, or that the ship's captain was getting angrier each day as he watched their rations disappear. Captain Vex stood in the ship's bridge, his forearms crossed as he stared at the fuel readings. His scaly green skin rippled with frustration as he spoke to his navigator in their native tongue. The human child eats too much for her size. We barely have enough supplies to reach the next station ourselves. What do you suggest, Captain? The navigator asked, though they both knew the answer. We cannot afford dead weight. The child must go. Lucy was playing with her father's old military dog tags when the cargo bay door suddenly opened with a loud hiss. Before she could react, 2 sets of rough alien hands grabbed her arms and lifted her from the floor. She tried to call out, but her voice caught in her throat as fear took hold. Wait, please, she finally managed to say as they dragged her toward the open doorway. The red landscape of Zirian 7 stretched out below like a sea of rust-colored sand and jagged rocks. My daddy said you would take care of me. But the aliens didn't understand human speech, or perhaps they simply chose not to listen. They tossed her small backpack after her, watching as it tumbled across the rocky ground. Inside were her last water purification tablets, a few energy bars, and the dog tags that had belonged to her father during his service in the Earth Defense Corps. The ship's engines roared to life with a sound like thunder, and Lucy felt the ground shake beneath her feet. She watched in disbelief as the metal craft lifted into the violet sky, growing smaller and smaller until it was just a tiny dot among the strange clouds. Then it was gone completely, leaving her alone on a world she had never seen before. The silence that followed was unlike anything Lucy had ever experienced. Back on the mining colony, there had always been the hum of machinery, the chatter of workers, the sound of her father's voice calling her name. Here, there was nothing but the whisper of wind across empty stone and the distant howl of something that might have been an animal. Lucy picked up her backpack and slung it over her shoulders, surprised by how heavy it felt now. Her father had always told her that if she ever got lost, she should look for high ground where she could see far in all directions. The crystalline mountains in the distance caught the light from Zirian 7's twin suns, creating sparkles that reminded her of the Christmas ornaments back home. She began walking, her small feet crunching on the strange red sand. Each step stirred up tiny clouds of dust that made her nose itch. The air tasted metallic and dry, nothing like the recycled atmosphere she was used to on the space stations and ships where she had spent most of her life. As she walked, Lucy talked to Mr. Buttons to keep herself from feeling scared. She told him about the pretty colors in the rocks around them, about how the mountains looked like giant ice cream cones, and about how they would find help soon. She had to believe that someone would come looking for her, that the aliens would realize their mistake and come back. But deep down, Lucy knew she was truly alone on this strange world, with nothing but her father's lessons about survival and the hope that somewhere among those crystal peaks, she might find safety. The twin suns began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful if Lucy hadn't been so afraid of what the darkness might bring. The ancient dragon Vithrax stirred in the deepest chamber of the crystal caves, his golden scales catching the light from glowing mineral veins that ran through the cavern walls. For 800 years, he had slept peacefully in this sacred place, dreaming of times when dragons soared freely through star-filled skies and the universe was young and wild. But something had disturbed his rest. The very stones beneath him vibrated with anger, and the crystal formations that had grown around his massive body over the centuries sang out in distress. Vithrax opened one enormous eye, then the other, and slowly lifted his great head from where it had rested on his folded wings. The world above had changed while he slept. Through the network of caves that connected to the surface, he could sense the presence of machines tearing into the sacred mountains. Mining equipment scraped and blasted at rock formations that had stood untouched for millions of years. Refugee ships from distant wars landed without permission, dumping their unwanted passengers across his territory like they were throwing away garbage. Vithrax rose to his full height, his head nearly touching the cavern ceiling 60 feet above. His wings, each one larger than a spacecraft, stretched wide as he shook off the dust and crystal fragments that had accumulated during his long sleep. The time for rest was over. He emerged from the caves as the twin suns reached their highest point in the violet sky. His golden scales gleamed like polished metal as he launched himself into the air, feeling the familiar joy of flight after so many years of stillness. From high above, he surveyed what had once been his peaceful domain. The mining operations were worse than he had sensed from below. Massive machines carved deep wounds into the mountainsides, leaving behind ugly scars and piles of waste rock. Ships came and went constantly, their engines leaving trails of smoke that stained the clean air. But it was the abandoned refugees scattered across the wasteland that truly caught his attention. Most were already dead, their bones picked clean by scavengers or buried beneath the shifting red sands. But as Vithrax circled lower, his sharp eyes spotted something that made him pause in mid-flight. A small figure was moving slowly across the poison glass fields, a dangerous area where ancient volcanic activity had created sheets of razor-sharp crystal that could cut through metal. The figure was tiny, no larger than his smallest claw, but something about the way it moved sparked his curiosity. Most creatures would have given up long ago in such a hostile place, but this small being continued forward with determination that reminded him of the old stories his mother had told him about brave warriors who never surrendered. Vithrax descended for a closer look and realized the figure was a human child, a little girl who couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. Her clothes were torn and dusty, her face burned by the harsh suns, and her steps were becoming more unsteady with each passing moment. Yet she kept walking, clutching something small and brown against her chest. The dragon's ancient heart, which had not felt compassion in centuries, stirred with an emotion he had almost forgotten. This child reminded him of the young dragons he had once protected in his own nest, before time and circumstance had scattered his kind across the galaxy. As he watched from above, Vithrax noticed movement in the crystal formations around the girl. A pack of crystal wolves had caught her scent and were moving in for an easy kill. These creatures were native to Zirion 7, their bodies made of living mineral that made them nearly invisible among the razor-sharp landscape. They hunted in groups, and even a full-grown warrior would struggle against them. The child stumbled and fell to her knees, clearly exhausted beyond her limits. The wolves crept closer, their crystalline fangs glinting in the sunlight. In moments, they would pounce, and the brave little human would become just another forgotten casualty of this cruel world. For the first time in 800 years, Vithrax made a choice that went against everything his kind had taught him about avoiding contact with other species. He folded his wings and dropped from the sky like a golden meteor, landing with surprising gentleness beside the unconscious child just as the crystal wolves prepared to attack. His massive form cast protective shadows over her tiny body, and his presence sent the predators scattering back into the crystal maze where they belonged. As he looked down at the sleeping child, Vithrax realized that his long slumber was truly over, and perhaps his real purpose was just beginning. Lucy opened her eyes slowly, blinking in confusion at the most beautiful sight she had ever seen. The cave around her looked like someone had carved it from captured starlight itself. The walls shimmered with colors that shifted from deep blue to silver to gold, and strange musical sounds echoed softly through the air, as if the rocks themselves were singing gentle lullabies. Pools of water scattered around the cavern floor glowed with a soft blue light that reminded Lucy of the bioluminescent fish she had seen in picture books about Earth's oceans. The air was warm and humid, nothing like the dry, harsh atmosphere outside. She sat up carefully, her muscles aching from her journey across the wasteland, and looked around in wonder. That's when she saw him. The dragon was enormous, easily the size of a small building, with scales that gleamed like polished gold coins. His great head rested on his front claws, and his eyes watched her with an intelligence that seemed older than time itself. Most children would have screamed and run, but Lucy had grown up listening to her father's bedtime stories about brave knights and friendly dragons who protected lost children. "Hello," she said softly, her voice echoing in the crystal chamber. "Are you lonely too?" The dragon's eyes widened with surprise. In all his 800 years of life, no creature had ever asked him such a simple, honest question. Most beings either fled in terror or tried to challenge him for his treasure. But this small human child looked at him with the same curiosity she might show a new puppy. Vithrax lowered his massive head until it was closer to her level, though he was still careful to keep his distance. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and rumbling like distant thunder, but somehow gentle. "I have been alone for a very long time, little one. What brings you to my domain?" Lucy told him her story while she explored the wondrous cave. She explained how her father had died from the plague, how the aliens had promised to take her to safety, and how they had abandoned her on this strange world instead. She spoke about her teddy bear Mr. Buttons, who had been lost somewhere in the wasteland, and how scared she had been walking through the crystal fields alone. As she talked, Lucy discovered that the cave was full of incredible things. There were formations that chimed like bells when she touched them, streams of water that flowed upward instead of down, and patches of the walls that showed moving pictures of distant stars and planets like living television screens. Vithrax found himself fascinated by this fearless child. He had witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations, had seen wars that consumed whole solar systems, and had watched species evolve from primitive creatures into spacefaring races. But he had never met anyone quite like Lucy, who approached the unknown with wonder instead of fear. "Would you like to learn how this place works?" the dragon asked, surprised by his own offer. He had never taught anyone the ancient secrets before. Lucy nodded eagerly, and Vithrax began showing her things that most beings in the galaxy had forgotten. He taught her how to listen to the songs in the crystal walls, which could tell her about weather patterns and approaching storms. He showed her how to find water hidden deep within solid rock by feeling for the vibrations that indicated underground streams. Most amazingly, he taught her how to speak to the crystals themselves. By placing her hands on certain formations and thinking very carefully about what she wanted to know, Lucy could make them glow brighter or dimmer, change colors, or even project images of faraway places. In return, Lucy shared stories about Earth that her father had told her. She described blue skies and green grass, oceans full of fish, and cities where millions of people lived together. She told Vithrax about her father's time as a soldier, how he had traveled to different worlds to help people, and how he had always dreamed of showing her the wonders of the galaxy. "He used to say that somewhere out there among all those stars, there were friends we hadn't met yet," Lucy said, looking up at the images of distant galaxies that played across the cave ceiling. "I think he was right." Days passed in this magical place, and Lucy grew stronger and healthier. The dragon's cave provided everything she needed: clean water, strange but nourishing fruits that grew from the crystal formations, and most importantly, companionship. For the first time since her father's death, she didn't feel afraid or alone. Neither Lucy nor Vithrax knew that high above them, invisible spy drones circled the crystal mountains, recording everything they did and transmitting the data to military bases scattered across the galaxy. Their unusual friendship was about to change everything. The grainy video footage appeared first on the Outer Rim communication networks, transmitted by an automated survey drone that had been mapping mineral deposits on Zirion 7. The images were incredible and seemingly impossible: a small human child soaring through purple clouds on the back of a massive golden dragon, both of them moving with grace and purpose across the crystal peaks. Within hours, the footage had spread across every major galactic news network. Social media platforms buzzed with excited discussions and heated debates. Some viewers dismissed it as clever computer animation or a publicity stunt for a new entertainment program. Others insisted it was proof that the old legends were true, that dragons had never really disappeared from the universe. Dr. Patricia Chen, the galaxy's leading expert on extinct species, was having her morning coffee on the research station orbiting Proxima Centauri when her assistant burst into her office with a tablet displaying the viral video. "Doctor, you need to see this immediately," the young researcher said, his voice shaking with excitement. "The computer analysis shows no signs of digital manipulation. The biological signatures are consistent with living tissue, not special effects." Patricia watched the footage 3 times before setting down her coffee cup with trembling hands. She had spent 30 years studying fossil remains and ancient texts that mentioned dragons, always believing they were mythological creatures created by primitive civilizations to explain natural phenomena they didn't understand. "Run every test we have," she ordered. "Spectral analysis, quantum resonance scans, temporal authenticity verification. I want to be absolutely certain before we report this to the Confederation Council." Meanwhile, on the military command station circling Earth's moon, Admiral Robert Hayes was having a very different reaction to the same footage. His weathered face remained expressionless as he studied the tactical implications of what he was seeing. "If dragons are real and they've allied with humans," he said to his staff officers, "we need to reassess every strategic calculation we've made about our species' position in the galaxy. A creature that size could carry enough firepower to level a city, and our sensors show it's moving at speeds that should be aerodynamically impossible." The Admiral's daughter, Commander Diana Hayes, was selected to lead the investigation team that would travel to Zirion 7. Diana had earned her reputation as one of the military's best xenobiologists, equally skilled at understanding alien life forms and commanding troops in dangerous situations. "I want a full scientific expedition, not just military personnel," Diana told her father as she reviewed the mission parameters. "If we approach this as a threat, we might miss the opportunity to learn something that could benefit all of humanity." The expedition fleet consisted of 3 ships carrying over 200 specialists, biologists, physicists, linguists, anthropologists, and enough security personnel to handle any potential dangers. They established their base camp in a valley 20 kilometers from the Dragon's Mountain, far enough away to avoid seeming threatening but close enough to conduct detailed observations. Dr. Marcus Webb, the team's senior physicist, couldn't believe the readings his instruments were showing. "The energy emissions from that mountain are off the charts," he reported to Commander Hayes. "We're detecting power levels that our best fusion reactors couldn't match, but there's no radiation signature and no heat waste. It's as if they're accessing some kind of energy source that operates outside our understanding of physics." Using powerful telescopes and sensitive audio equipment, the research team began documenting the daily activities of the human child and her dragon companion. They watched in amazement as Lucy learned to communicate with the crystal formations, causing them to change colors and emit musical tones. Even more shocking was when they observed her apparently floating several feet off the ground while the dragon watched approvingly. "Human beings don't have the physiological capability for levitation," Dr. Sarah Kim, the team's medical expert, reported during their daily briefing. "But the child is clearly demonstrating abilities that contradict everything we know about human limitations." Word of the expedition's preliminary findings reached the highest levels of government within days. Emergency sessions were called in the Confederation Council, where representatives from dozens of species debated what this discovery might mean for the balance of power in their region of the galaxy. Some council members argued for immediate contact, hoping to establish diplomatic relations with the dragon and learn about its capabilities. Others, particularly those from species that had historical conflicts with humanity, suggested that the situation posed too great a risk to ignore. "If humans can bond with creatures of such power," declared Ambassador Zinthrop of the Hegemony, "they could become a dominant force that threatens the stability we have maintained for centuries." As the political debates raged across the galaxy, Lucy and Vithrax continued their peaceful existence in the Crystal Caves, unaware that their friendship had become the most important story in known space. The morning Lucy heard the sound of approaching aircraft, she was practicing her newest skill, making the crystal formation sing in harmony while floating 3 feet above the cave floor. Vithrax had taught her that the ancient crystals responded to both thought and emotion, and she was getting better at creating beautiful melodies that echoed through their underground home. "Little star," Vithrax said, using the pet name he had given her, "we have visitors approaching. I sense many minds filled with fear and curiosity." Lucy gently lowered herself to the ground and followed the dragon to the cave entrance. In the distance, she could see military vehicles surrounding their mountain, and aircraft hovering in the purple sky. Soldiers in protective suits were setting up equipment and pointing strange devices toward their home. Commander Diana Hayes spoke through a powerful amplifier that echoed across the crystal fields. "This is the Earth Defense Force. We're here to ensure the safety of the human child. Please allow us to approach peacefully." Lucy looked up at Vithrax with worried eyes. "They think you're going to hurt me, don't they?" The great dragon's golden eyes showed both sadness and understanding. "Fear makes people do foolish things, little star. They cannot imagine that a creature like me could care for someone like you." As the military forces began moving closer to the mountain, something unexpected happened. The crystal formations around them started glowing brighter and humming with increased intensity. The very ground beneath their feet began to vibrate with a deep, musical tone that seemed to come from the planet's core. Dr. Patricia Chen, monitoring the situation from the command post, watched her instruments in amazement. "Commander, the energy readings are spiking beyond anything we've recorded. It's as if the entire mountain is responding to their presence." Suddenly, Vithrax emerged from the cave with Lucy riding safely on his back, just behind his great neck where she could hold onto his golden scales. The sight of the massive dragon launching into the sky sent the ground forces scrambling for cover, but Lucy's clear voice rang out over the chaos. "Please don't be afraid. He's my friend. He saved me when everyone else left me to die." The dragon landed gracefully in the center of the military encampment, his massive form dwarfing the vehicles and equipment around him. But instead of showing aggression, he carefully lowered his head so that Lucy could slide down to the ground safely. "You have come seeking answers," Vithrax said, his deep voice carrying clearly across the valley. "Then listen, and learn truths that your species has forgotten." Commander Hayes stepped forward cautiously, her weapon lowered but ready. "We're here to protect the child. She shouldn't be living in the wilderness with a dangerous creature." Lucy ran to stand beside the dragon's massive front claw, looking tiny but determined. "He's not dangerous. He taught me things I never knew I could do. He showed me that humans and dragons used to be friends a long time ago." Vithrax's ancient eyes turned toward the assembled forces, and when he spoke, his words carried the weight of millennia. Long before your species scattered across the stars, humans and dragons lived as partners on your birth world. We were guardians and protectors, while humans provided us with something we had never experienced before, the ability to see the universe through eyes of wonder and hope. The dragon gestured with one massive wing toward the crystal formations around them. Your ancestors could channel our power, just as this child does now. Together, we could reshape worlds, heal damaged lands, and create beauty that lasted for thousands of years. But when the great exodus came and humans fled to the stars, the connection was broken. We dragons retreated into sleep, waiting for the day when the bond might be restored. As if to demonstrate his words, Lucy placed her small hand against Vithrax's scales and closed her eyes in concentration. Immediately, the barren ground around them began to change. Green shoots of grass pushed through the red soil, and tiny flowers bloomed in brilliant colors that had never existed on Zirion 7 before. The military personnel watched in stunned silence as crystal spires began rising from the earth, singing with harmonious frequencies that filled the air with music more beautiful than any symphony. The dead wasteland was transforming into something that looked like a garden from paradise itself. "This is impossible," Dr. Chen whispered, recording everything with shaking hands. "The child is somehow accessing energy sources that defy every law of physics we understand." Commander Hayes spoke into her communicator with urgency. "Command, this is Hayes. Recommend immediate reassessment of human strategic capabilities. The child has established what appears to be a symbiotic relationship with an entity of unprecedented power. Advise all stations to monitor for similar phenomena." As news of the transformation spread across the galactic networks, something remarkable began happening on distant worlds. On 12 different planets scattered throughout known space, ancient caves that had been silent for millennia suddenly began to glow with golden light. Dragons that had slumbered for centuries opened their eyes and lifted their great heads, sensing that the time of separation was ending. The bond between humans and dragons, broken for so long that it had become nothing more than legend, was awakening once again. And Lucy, a small girl who had been abandoned and left to die, had become the key to humanity's greatest alliance. The universe would never be the same.